Welcome back everyone to Advanced Scratch. Today we're going to be going over lesson 2. So let's get right into it. The overview for today's lesson is that we're first going to learn about lists, and then we're going to be introduced to our final project and start working on it. Before we do any of that though, let's start off with some review. I'll ask each question and then you guys can pause the video and try to answer it on your own, and then I'll go over the answer. The first question is, what blocks do you use if you want to have text input? The answer for this question is you want to use the ask block and the answer block. The next question is, what blocks do you use if you want to make a randomizer, a number randomizer? The answer to this question is you want to use the random number block and the variable blocks. Great, now that the review is out of the way, let's start off by learning about lists. So what exactly is a list? I'm sure you guys have seen a list in your own life. We use lists all the time. An example of a list is a grocery list. Lists essentially store multiple pieces of information. Each piece of information has an index, which is its order in the list. For example, in the list over here, the grocery list, each item has its own index. We have bananas, bread, eggs, cheese, and butter. For cheese, the index is 4, which is its position in the list. It's the 4th item in the list. And this list has an overall length of 5, since it has 5 items total. To create a list in Scratch, you can go under the variables section and click make a list, and then you can name it whatever you want. There are a lot of blocks which you can use to modify lists. Some of the more common ones you might have to use later on is you can add something to a list using the add block. You can delete a certain index of the list. For example, if I wanted to delete eggs, I would say delete 3 of grocery list, and then it would delete the 3rd index, which is eggs. You can delete the entire list. You can replace an item, a certain index, with something else. So if I wanted to replace bread with bagels instead, I would say replace item 2 of grocery list with bagels, and it would get rid of bread and replace it with bagels instead at the same exact position. And also make sure that you use the delete all of block at the start of your program to ensure that duplicates aren't added to the list. Now that you guys have a basic understanding of lists and how to use them in Scratch, it is your guys' turn. I want you guys to make a program that contains a list. It will ask the user if they want to either add, delete, or replace items in the list. And it should use a forever loop to do this. Some hints for this project are that you will need to use multiple if statements in your code. And for the delete and replace, remember that you can't delete or replace an item in the list which does not exist. If I tried to delete the 6th item in this list, is that possible? No, you can't delete an item which doesn't exist. There is no 6th item in this list. The same thing goes for replacing. I can't replace the 12th item in this list because there is no 12th item. So make sure that the index, which is the item number, make sure that the index the user puts in is within the list. Let me go show you guys a quick demonstration of what this project looks like before you guys get started on it. It will ask me, do I want to add, delete, or replace? If I type add, I can put in whatever I want, so I'll type in person, and it will add it to the end of the list. If I type in replace, it asks me which index do you want to replace. So I'll say I want to replace the 2nd index, and I want to say dog. So it replaces the 2nd index with dog. It used to say boy, but now it says dog, right? Because I replaced it. Finally, you can delete, and I want to delete thing. So when I delete thing, notice how it disappears and everything else gets bumped up 1. So dog used to be an index 2, now it's an index 1. Same with girl and person. Now, if I try to delete or replace something which doesn't exist, so if I try to delete the 4th index, it just tells me it doesn't exist. Same thing with replace. If I try to replace the 12th index, there is no 12th index, right? So it's just going to say there is no 12th index in the list. Now that you guys understand this project, I want you guys to pause the video and take as much time as you need to work on this. And when you guys are ready to reveal the answer, you can resume this video and I will go over it. Okay, assuming you guys paused the video and worked on this project for a bit, I will be going over the answer now. You want to start off with the when flag is clicked block. And then remember, we want to delete the entire list at the beginning of the program to make sure there are no duplicates. And then, like I said before in the project description, you want to use a forever loop to repeat the code. Then we want to get the user's input to figure out whether they want to add, delete, or replace something in the list. And we can do that using the ask block over here. Finally, we want to use if statements to check all the different possibilities. So the first possibility is if the user said they want to add something. If they do, then we're going to ask them what they want to add and then add that to the list. Now, if we want to delete or replace an item, things get a little bit more tricky. We want to make sure that the index is within the list if they are trying to delete or replace. So like I said before, if they want to delete or replace the 6th item in this grocery list, that's not possible. They can't do that because there is no 6th item here, right? There's only 5 items. So to check this, we can say if the index is less than the length of the list, or if the index is equal to the length of the list, then we can either delete it from the list or we can replace that index. The reason why this works is if the index is less than the length of the list, that means it's either 1, 2, 3, or 4. And if it's equal to the length of the list, that must mean it's 5. So that means that the index is in the list. If it isn't any of those, then that must mean that the index is greater than the length of the list, meaning it's greater than 5, for example, in this case. And that would mean 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or any number greater than that. And as you guys can tell, all of those items are not in the list, right? So by checking whether it's less than the length of the list or equal to the length of the list, we're making sure that the index actually does exist in the list. We do that for both the delete and replace, and if it does exist, then we can either delete or replace whatever we want to. Otherwise, we just say it doesn't exist in the list, and then the code repeats over and over again since it's in a forever loop. So this project might have been a bit confusing for you guys. If it was, feel free to pause the video and look through the code again or try it out again and watch through this part again to try and understand it better. But for now, we're going to be moving on to our final project, which is Hangman. I'm sure a lot of you guys have played Hangman before. It is a game between two people where one person places one blank for every letter in a word, and the other person guesses one letter at a time. If the guessed letter doesn't exist in the word, a body part is drawn. This goes on until the player guesses the word or the body is fully drawn. Let me show you guys a live demonstration of this game. So as soon as I run the program, it shows me 3 blanks. So my word that I'm trying to guess is 3 letters long, and so far I don't know any of the letters. So let me start by just guessing a letter, maybe D. Or let me start with the vowel. I'll start with O. Oh, and I correctly guessed one of the letters. So blank, O, blank. So there's an O in the middle of my 3-letter word. Maybe let me try B. Oh, I guessed incorrectly. So it's going to draw the head of the hangman. Okay. Let me try guessing B again. Let's see what the program does. Oh, it says that I already guessed it and it doesn't do anything. So if you try and guess the same letter again, it shouldn't work. It should tell you to try again. Let me try another letter. Let me try S. Oh, I guessed incorrectly again. Let me try L. Let me try D. Oh, I got it. Oh, I think I know it. So it said D-O blank. So I think it's dog because it's the only other possible solution. So I'm going to put G, and I guessed one of the letters, and I guessed the word. Great. So I had 3 guesses left. I was pretty close to losing, but I didn't lose. The word was dog. Now let's try again. Let me start with D again. Okay, I guessed incorrectly. So I have the head. Let me try A. Oh, and by the way, guys, notice how it said that I won that round, so it put a win in my variable here. Let me try M. That was not right either. Wow, I'm really not able to guess this one. C. Okay, I have 2 guesses left. O. Oh, I got a letter. Okay. L. Wow, I'm really close to losing. Oh, I already guessed that letter. Okay. Let me try W. Oh. And I lost. An innocent man. Okay, so this person was fully drawn out and I lost. The word was boy. And it just gave me 1 tick in my losses variable over here. So there's like 2 variables here, wins and losses, and it keeps track of how many times you've won and how many times you've lost. So that is how this game is going to work. Hopefully you guys understand that. So let's start off by creating all of the variables and lists that we need. So variables and lists for Hangman. What variables and lists do we need to code for Hangman in Scratch? In other words, what do we need to keep track of during a game of Hangman? Try and think about a game of Hangman in real life. What are the things you need to keep track of on the whiteboard when you're drawing out all of the Hangman stuff, like the dashes, etc.? What do you need to keep track of? Remember, variables store 1 piece of information while lists store multiple pieces of information. So I want you guys to pause the video and try and brainstorm some ideas. The way I would recommend you guys do this is get a piece of paper and split it in half. On the left side, you can try and think of all the variables you'll need, and on the right side, you'll try and think of all the lists you will need. So write down each variable or list you will need and describe what it will be used for. So pause the video and work on that for as long as you need to, and then I will go over some potential ideas once you guys resume the video. Okay, assuming you guys are able to brainstorm for a bit, let's start off with the variables. So for the variables, some important things you need to keep track of. First of all, the wins and the losses. You want to keep track of how many times has the player won and how many times has the player lost. Next, we want to keep track of guesses left. We want to make sure we're keeping track of how many guesses does the player have left before they lose. Finally, we want to have a variable which stores the word. What is the word the player is trying to guess? So when I was playing in the program over here with my example, the word that the player or me, I was trying to guess was dog, right? We want to keep track of that in the program. Okay, next let's go over the lists you will need. First of all, you will need a dictionary because we need to store words for the player to guess. And every time you start a new round, the computer will choose a random word and that will be the word you're trying to guess. Next, we want to have a list for the word being guessed. This is basically just the blank, blank, blank that you see during a game of Hangman, like the dashes where you have to put in the letters. Now, the reason why we would want to use a list instead of a variable is because every time the player correctly guesses a letter, we want to replace the blank with the letter. And it's a lot easier to do that with a list than it is to do with a variable. So that's why we want to use list for that and not a variable. Finally, we want to have a list for letters already guessed. We have to keep track of the letters the player already guessed because, as you guys saw in the program, I tried to guess a letter that I had already guessed a lot of the time. And we want to make sure that we're able to catch that and tell the player that they already guessed the letter. So we can use a list to do that, and every time the player guesses a letter, we can just add it to the list. So those are the variables and lists you want to create in your game of Hangman. So what I want everyone to do is go to your Scratch, and I want you guys to create a new project. And once you create a new project, I want you guys to start creating all of these variables and lists. So once again, pause the video and take a few minutes to create all of these variables and lists. Okay, assuming you guys are able to do that, this is what your end result should look like. These are all of your variables. You want your guesses left, your losses, your wins, and your word. And then you want all your lists. You want your dictionary, your letters already guessed, and your word being guessed. If you guys are a little bit confused on what some of these lists or variables might mean or do, don't worry, because in future lessons we're going to go over them and we're going to actually start using them. And it will make a lot more sense when you actually use them. Great, so today we went over what lists are and we also started applying it to Hangman, which was our final project. Let's quickly do some review. First of all, how do you make a list? The answer to this question is you go to the variables section and then there you can make a list there. The second question is how do you add things to a list? The answer to that question is you want to use the add block. The third question is how can you delete things from a list? The answer to that is you can use the delete block. And finally, what does the index of a list mean? The index of a list is the spot in the list where a particular item is. Okay, that is all for today's lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next lesson. Bye, everyone.